This was supposed to be one more rules update, one more FIFA tweak, one more little improvement before the World Cup. It is not. Because buried inside the new law changes is a rule that could change the emotional DNA of football's biggest matches. If a player walks off the pitch in protest at a referee's decision, the referee can now send him off. Red card, done. And the part that should really worry players is this. This wasn't leaked by some rumor account. It was officially approved. This was supposed to be one of those boring pre-tournament updates. A few rule tweaks, some referee protocol, a little time-wasting crackdown, the kind of thing fans half read, players pretend not to worry about, and pundits promise will improve the flow of the game. But then one line jumped out, and suddenly this stopped feeling technical, because among the new World Cup law changes is a rule that says a player who leaves the field in protest at a referee's decision can be shown a red card. Not a warning, not a talking to, not a vague threat. A red card, straight out. And let's be clear right at the start, because this matters. The dramatic headline writes itself as some kind of leak, some hidden policy, some secret anti-player crackdown sneaking out before the tournament, but the truth is almost more powerful than that. This wasn't leaked, it was officially approved. FIFA and the IFAB put it out in public. Reuters reported it before the tournament. The BBC explained how it works. This is not conspiracy territory, this is policy, this is the rule book, and that is exactly why it hits so hard. Because football has always had an uneasy relationship with protest. Players complain, captains surround referees, benches explode, managers gesture like they're being robbed in broad daylight. Entire matches can become arguments with a ball occasionally rolling through them. FIFA and the referee chiefs have clearly decided they've had enough. And this new rule is not subtle. It is a statement. If you try to turn a decision into a walk-off protest, the referee now has the power to turn that protest into a sending off. That matters because it does not just punish an action. It targets a symbol. Walking off the field in protest is one of the strongest visual acts a player can make without actually abandoning the sport itself. It says the decision is not just wrong, it is illegitimate. It says the game cannot continue under these terms. It says the authority of the referee is being rejected in real time. And FIFA's answer to that gesture is now brutally simple. If you make that move, you may be gone. The official wording is important here because it shows how deliberate this is. FIFA's release on the special IFAB meeting in Vancouver said that, at the discretion of the competition organizer, the referee may sanction with a red card any player who leaves the field of play in protest at a referee's decision. It also said this new rule will apply to any team official who incites players to leave the field. And then, it added something even harsher. A team that causes a match to be abandoned will, in principle, forfeit the match. That is not just discipline, that is deterrence. So now step back and look at what they have really built here. If players stage a protest by walking off, the referee can send one off. If team staff encourage the walk-off, they can be sanctioned too. If the whole protest spirals into abandonment, the team can lose the game by forfeit. That is not a casual update. That is a legal structure built to crush one very specific kind of rebellion. And FIFA did not invent this out of nowhere. They had a reason. In fact, they had a very recent one. Reuters and the BBC both linked the new rule directly to the controversy in the Africa Cup of Nations final, where Senegal's players walked off in protest after a late penalty was awarded to host Morocco. According to Reuters, Senegal left the field, returned after roughly 14 minutes, saw Morocco miss the spot kick, then won after extra time, only to later be stripped of the title by CAF's Disciplinary Appeal Board. The BBC put the delay at around 17 minutes and noted that Morocco were eventually declared the winners after the result was overturned. Either way, the message is unmistakable. Football's lawmakers saw a major final disrupted by on-pitch protest and decided they never want to watch that scene again at a World Cup. And once you understand that origin point, the rule makes emotional sense from FIFA's perspective. Their nightmare is not just a bad decision. Football survives bad decisions all the time. Their nightmare is a bad decision that triggers public disorder, televised defiance, and a visible collapse of referee authority. The walk-off is dangerous because it turns dissent into theater. It creates a moment the whole world can understand in one glance. No translation needed, no tactical nuance. The players are literally leaving the pitch because they do not accept the call. That image is devastating for any organization that wants the referee to remain the unquestioned center of control, so FIFA's answer is to make the cost of that image much higher. But here is where it gets interesting, because this is not just one isolated anti-protest rule floating by itself. It is part of a much wider behavioral crackdown that changes the entire tone of the tournament. Reuters reported that the law changes were designed to combat discrimination, reduce time wasting, improve tempo, and enhance the player and fan experience. That sounds clean and administrative, but when you look at the details, what you really see bureaucracy is a tournament trying to tighten control over players, over match flow, over confrontation, over restarts, over substitutions, over dissent, and even over what gets hidden from microphones and cameras. Take the mouth covering rule. Reuters reported that a player who covers his mouth with a hand, arm, or shirt in a confrontational situation can receive a red card. BBC said this was linked to the Gianluca Prestiani and Vinicius Jr. controversy, where offensive language was alleged, but the covered mouth made it impossible to prove exactly what was said in the moment. Pierluigi Collina's logic, as BBC quoted it, is stark. In a confrontational situation, covering the mouth suggests you're doing something very wrong, potentially, and the sanction can be the red card. Now place that next to the walk-off protest rule, and a pattern becomes obvious. FIFA is not just targeting time wasting, it is targeting concealment and defiance. Hide your mouth in a hostile exchange, risk a red. Walk off in protest, risk a red. Encourage others to walk, risk sanction. Force abandonment, risk forfeit. This is a tournament rule package built around one central instinct: keep the match under control, keep the authority structure intact, and stop visible acts of rebellion before they can spread. And then there is the captain-only philosophy, which helps explain the whole mood even if it is not exactly the same rule. FIFA had already rolled out guidelines at the Olympic football tournament saying only team captains should approach the referee in certain situations. Infantino called it a key measure for the future of the game. Pierluigi Collina said it was about enhancing fairness and respect while allowing dialogue between referee and teams. FIFA encouraged the procedure to be used globally, so even before this new World Cup crackdown, the direction of travel was obvious. Fewer people talking to the referee, less mob pressure, less dissent, more hierarchy. And when you combine that with the new red card protest rule, the message to players gets very sharp very quickly. Don't swarm, don't perform outrage, don't stage a public rejection of a decision. If there is dialogue, it will be controlled. If there is protest, it will be punished. If there is escalation, it may end with players off, staff off, or matches forfeited. That is a dramatic cultural shift in a sport that has always lived with a certain level of emotional chaos. Now, supporters of the rule will say this is overdue, and to be fair, they have a case. They will say modern football has become ridiculous around officials. They will say referees get mobbed too often. They will say games are slowed by theatrics and outrage. They will say players know how to weaponize delay, public pressure, and crowd manipulation. They will say that if football wants respect, it has to enforce it. That argument is not crazy. In fact, a lot of ordinary viewers probably agree with part of it. Anyone who has watched 5 players scream around a referee after every controversial foul knows how ugly it can look. Anyone who has watched a team delay every restart at the end of a match knows how much it drains the sport. Believe that deterrence has to be stronger than a yellow card here and there. That is why the broader package includes 5-second countdowns for goal kicks and throw-ins, 10-second substitution limits, and tougher off-field treatment rules for injured players. The entire philosophy is built on the idea that the game must move, the officials must be protected, and manipulation must become more expensive. But critics of the protest red card rule will ask a different question, and it is a serious one. What happens when the referee really does get it catastrophically wrong? Because that is where football becomes uncomfortable. Everyone loves discipline until discipline is used in the middle of a scandal. Everyone loves order until the wrong person is controlling it. A rule like this is easy to support in the abstract. It gets harder when you imagine it in the concrete. A knockout match, a possible tournament-ending error, players losing their minds, and now the law book gives the referee even more power over the emotional fallout of his own decision. That is where the fear comes from. Not that players should be able to do anything they want, but that FIFA's answer to legitimate fury might simply be to criminalize the most dramatic form of showing it. And football fans know this sport too well to ignore that tension, because controversial calls are not rare. VAR has not ended controversy. Semi-automated systems have not ended controversy. Referee authority has not ended controversy. What this new rule does is shift the balance of risk. If you walk, you may go. If your coach tells you to walk, he may go. If the whole thing falls apart, your team may lose the match by default. In other words, the law now tells players, even if you think the decision is outrageous, be very careful how visibly you reject it. And there is another subtle but important point here. FIFA's own release says the sanction is at the discretion of the competition organizer and that the referee may sanction with a red card. That wording matters. It means this is not some robotic automatic switch where stepping over the touchline in anger instantly produces a sending off every time. There is discretion, there is interpretation, there is judgment, which means inevitably there will be inconsistency. And inconsistency is where where football arguments go to live forever. Because if one referee shows red in a tense quarterfinal for a protest walk-off, but another only warns a player in a similar moment, the argument begins instantly. Was the law applied evenly? Was the star treated differently? Was one team being made an example of? Was another protected because the match was too big? The more discretion you build into a high-emotion disciplinary rule, the more you invite future controversy over when it was or was not used, and that may be the most fascinating part of all. FIFA is trying to reduce chaos with a rule that could easily create a new kind of chaos. Imagine the scene. A massive decision goes against a team. One player storms off the field edge in visible protest. The referee reaches for the red. Suddenly, the conversation is no longer just about the original call. Now, it is about the red as well. The protest becomes a disciplinary incident. The disciplinary incident becomes a suspension issue. The suspension issue becomes a post-match war. And because this is the World Cup, every second of it gets replayed 10,000 times from 10,000 angles with 10,000 opinions attached. So, yes, on paper, this is a rule about respect and control, but in practice, it could become one of the defining pressure points of the tournament, especially because the rest of the rule changes are also tightening the screws everywhere else. Reuters reported that VAR can now intervene in more situations, including clearly incorrect second yellow card reds, mistaken identity, wrongly awarded corners, and attacking fouls before play restarts when they directly affect goals, penalties, or disciplinary outcomes. Substituted players now have 10 seconds to leave. Goal kicks and throw-ins can be punished with countdowns that hand the opposition a corner or throw. Injured players who receive treatment must generally leave for at least a minute after the restart. Even goalkeeper injury tactical timeouts are being squeezed. This is a tournament entering with a full control architecture, not one isolated change. And that is why this protest red card rule feels bigger than one bullet point in a memo. It is a symbol of what football's lawmakers think the modern game has become. Too performative, too manipulative, too confrontational, too willing to challenge authority publicly, too willing to slow the spectacle down. FIFA's answer is to tighten everything: the clock, the exits, the dialogue, the confrontations, and the protest itself. But there is a risk in all of this, and it is the risk every authority faces when it tries to discipline emotion out of a game built on emotion. Football is not chess. It is not clean. It is not quiet. It is not meant to feel procedural when the stakes get insane. The best World Cup moments are often right on the edge of control: joy, rage, pressure, panic, injustice, comeback, disbelief. If the authorities misread the difference between protecting the game and over-policing the game, they can end up creating a tournament that is tidier on paper and colder in spirit. And if the public starts to feel that the rules are there, less to preserve fairness and more to suppress visible dissent, the backlash will be immediate. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with a rule that is real, a rule that is official, a rule that was approved, not leaked, a rule that says if a player leaves the field in protest at a referee's decision, he can be shown a red card, a rule that also reaches team officials who incite it, a rule that lives inside a wider crackdown on confrontation, time wasting, and referee dissent. And once you strip away the bureaucratic language, the message is brutally simple. If you want to turn outrage into a public walk-off, FIFA now has a way to hit you for it. That is why this rule matters. Not because players protest all the time by literally walking off. They do not. It matters because it reveals the direction of power in the modern game. The authorities want the protest contained, the confrontation legible, the officials protected, and the spectacle moving. What they are less comfortable with is any visible act that says the authority itself has lost the dressing room, the pitch, or the moment. And that is why this could become one of the most important rules of the entire tournament, even if it is barely used. Sometimes the power of a law is not in how often it gets enforced. It is in how deeply everyone knows it is there. A visible threat changes behavior before the referee even needs to act. That is what deterrence is. That is what FIFA wants. And that is why, for players who like to push the line, this really may feel like the end of an era. So what do you think? Is this exactly the kind of rule football needs to protect referees and stop chaos? Or is FIFA giving officials too much power to punish emotional protest in the biggest moments? Drop your take below. Because whether you love this rule or hate it, one thing is clear. This World Cup is not just changing how football is played, it is changing how football is allowed to argue.